for you today.
Yeah, hello, Jessica. I don't think we've met yet.
Hi.
Okay, are we ready to go?
You should be live streaming.
So
Yes.
I take that as a yes then.
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome to the place shaping panel on the Monday, the 18th of January. Can we do the roll call, please, Jessica?
Of course, Councillor Brennan.
Present.
And do you have any interest to declare?
Sorry, Jessica, no declarations of interest.
Brilliant. And Councillor Ballman.
Yes and no.
Councillor Clancy. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, present and a site in the GNDP area.
Brilliant, thank you. And Councillor Hensel.
Present, general interest as portfolio holder for planning and conservation.
Thank you. And Councillor Nurdin.
I'm present, and I don't know if I need to make a declaration, but I do have a property in the Brundle area which is mentioned as one of the projects that the SIL money is going to be spent on.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas.
Present, no declarations.
And Councillor Ward.
Present, no declarations.
Brilliant, thank you. That's everyone, Chair.
Okay, we'll move to apologies for absence, please.
Okay, so we've had apologies from Councillor Hartley and Councillor Lawn.
Okay, moving then quickly. Sorry.
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Starling said she sent her apologies as well.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
I'll add her onto the list.
Thank you, Chair.
Can we move to the minutes of the last meeting, then? There's the 4th of January. Are you any issues that you want to draw to our attention about accuracy? Stuart, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. In the recommendations, I did ask to be added to the recommendations, really the economic and retail study, that we're happy with the recommendations, subject to that being highlighted. It is highlighted in the minutes, but I did ask specifically for that to go in the recommendations to Cabinet because it will be extremely relevant going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that not at the beginning of the recommendations? It says that subject to receipt of the economic and retail study, those recommendations. Doesn't that capture it? Sorry, I can't hear you. Are you on mute?
Sorry, Chairman. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I suppose it does. It does, but it is important. I just wanted to stress the importance of it. That was all. Really.
Okay. Did you want to amend the minutes at all? Or are you happy with it as it stands?
Well, I would like to say subject to the receipt of the retail study and any implications which such study should have on the housing numbers going forward. I think it's really important to state that at this stage, especially in view of things like the appeal on Anglia Square, which may come off, may not come off, the implications on the deal yard, which may or may not come off, the availability of more space for conversion in the city of Norwich, which will implicate on the housing numbers. But I just wanted to emphasize a little stronger, Chairman, that's all.
Is everybody happy for that inclusion? Anybody dissent from that? I don't see any. Jessica, do you?
No, Chair.
Would you like to read those words exactly, Stuart, to Jessica so she can take a note of that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. All I would ask you to do to publish the draft GNDP Reg 19 Town and Country Planning regulations from February to 15th, and that the Cabinet take due regard of the implications of the economic and retail study on housing numbers in relation to specifically Norwich.
Did you get that, Jessica?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Right. Any matters arising from the minutes then? Do you see any hands up, Jessica? I don't.
No, there's no hands up.
Okay, we'll move then to the main item on the agenda then, which is the Greater Norwich Growth Board 5-year investment plan. before you start, Grant, there is obviously a point that I'm sure you want to raise. In the actual report itself, it refers to the panel shaping committee, whereas we recognise it as the panel shaping panel. I'm sure you'd want to draw attention to that, wouldn't you?
Never even saw it.
Okay, right. Obviously, this is a very important document. It's good to see that Broadland features significantly in it. Clearly, what we're being asked to do is to endorse these recommendations for investment from the SIL money. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Paul. I think you're going to take us through this, are you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Good evening. So I'll run very briefly through the report. Obviously, you've had it in front of you. Hopefully, you've had time to digest it. Clear, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So the report you have before you today considers the joint 5-year investment plan for the period 2021 to 2026 and the annual growth programme, or AGP as it's sometimes referred to, for the period 2021 to 2022. That document itself being on page 16 of your papers onwards. In the spirit of picking up slight corrections early doors, para 1.1 of your report does refer to the 5-year investment plan for the period 2020 to 2025 and the annual growth programme 2020 to 2021. That should, as I outlined, originally be for the periods 2021 to 2026 and the AGP for the period 2021 to 2022. So by way of a little bit of overarching background, most members, I think, will be aware that Broadland, Norwich and South Norfolk pool their collective SIL incomes and then allocate it to priority projects that support the growth agenda across the whole of Greater Norwich. And this very much reflects the strategic approach we take to planning for and indeed the delivery of growth. As hopefully you'll have seen in reviewing the 5-year infrastructure investment plan, it sets out an updated position on infrastructure delivery. It sets out revised SIL income, which is set out in table 1 on page 34 of your papers, which shows our latest position in terms of income and commitments. It provides updates on projects that have previously been accepted. These are all set out in Appendix C of the Infrastructure Investment Plan, page 39, and provides some information on preparation for schemes in future years. And these are set out in Appendices D and E on pages 51 to 63 of your papers. And hopefully you've had a chance to look through those. I've referred to the annual growth programme in the past, and that's essentially the first year of the 5-year investment plan. And those projects identified within the first year, albeit that sometimes they may stretch across a couple of years in delivery, are those that are allocated funding. Projects identified in the remaining years 2 to 4, but not specifically mentioned in the AGP, are indications of what our priorities are expected to be going forwards. But at this stage, we are not allocating money towards those projects. That will be the subject of future considerations by each of the individual councils, including this committee. As the chairman referred to, and as hopefully you've picked up from the report set out in paras 3.5 to 3.6, which explains the annual growth programme, 2 of the 4 specified projects identified for funding within this annual growth programme are within Broadland. That's the Brundle Sports Hub and Bure Valley Path. The sort of outline in terms of what those projects comprise are set out within the 5-year infrastructure investment plan itself. Again, hopefully you've had a chance to review those. They're on page 36 of your papers. I'll just repeat them quickly. So Brundle Sports Hub, an allocation of £100,000, albeit out of a budget or total budget of around 1.4 million, is to deliver a multi-sport floodlit third generation artificial grass pitch with associated fencing, flood lighting, a maintenance storage container, hard standing, so on and so forth, and includes a single story clubhouse and changing room. The second of the projects is Bure Valley Access Path, and this is provided with funding of £263,124 out of a total project budget of around £800,000. And again, as detailed in these papers, that delivers a crossing over the A140 to improve that point of crossing across the Bure Valley Path, a series of promotional arrangements around the Bure Valley Path itself, the identification of circular walks and the promotion thereof, and indeed improvements to way marking and surface improvements, and indeed ecological enhancements across those projects. Overall, we would consider that the projects identified in the 5-year infrastructure investment plan are those that are the priorities for infrastructure investment within this year, taking account of a range of different evidence and input from indeed Broadland, Norwich, South Norfolk councils themselves, a range of stakeholder partners, and the county council, particularly in regards to transport and education. And at that point, I'll simply move to the recommendations proposed within the report, and that being that it is proposed that Place Shaping Committee advises, or should be Place Shaping Panel, as I'm advised, advises Cabinet to recommend to the Council that it firstly agrees the Greater Norwich Joint 5-year Infrastructure Investment Plan, and secondly, approves the allocation of SIL to the 4 specified projects, and those are identified in paragraphs 3.5 of the report, and the allocation of £2 million to support the educational capital programme within Greater Norwich, and the allocation of £341,000 to projects GP46 and GP53 that were previously allocated funding in the 18-19 AGP, but on review require increased funding, and those projects have been fully reassessed as other projects would have been considered. That's all I intend to say, Chairman, but I am, of course, happy to answer questions.
Lana, you wanted to make a comment, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I did. Again, I'm going to thank the officers at the Greater Norwich Growth Board and the members who sit on that one for allocating the money equitably across the districts. However, I'm going to express my disappointment, as I did last year, at the amount that's given to education. And see, year on year, it seems to be the same amount, and the infrastructure is not improving or getting any better, or giving young people better opportunities. And I just wish, and I will pass this up the line, my disappointment that the frame of mind would alter. That's all I have to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to comment on that?
Not in great detail, Chairman. The only thing I'd say is the annual allocation of SIL to education was agreed by all the constituent partners at the Greater Norwich Growth Board level. Certainly, if members here want to indicate their desire to see that position revisited, it's certainly reasonable for them to do so if that's their view, but it would be important that any change in that is agreed across the partnership.
Can I just come back on that one? I fully accept that, but unless we or somebody does not expresses disappointment at the amount, then nothing much changes, does it? And this came up last year, it was the same amount. This year it's exactly the same amount. It's the rolling capital project is clearly not sufficient. We've had closure of Holt Hall and somewhere else. I've had the letters. I'm presuming you've had the letters as well. So it would have just been nicer to see that number be increased this year. But there you go. you know, I don't think either I or the panel have enough teeth to make those changes, as it's, you know, people far above, well, my pay grade certainly who decide this. But I really think in the nicest possible way, it would be helpful to young people in Norfolk if this amount was increased. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, perhaps you could note that comment and feed it back.
Certainly, I've Councillor Hempsall's already mentioned this point to me, and I have reiterated it to the directors who sit on the Infrastructure Delivery Board Director Group underneath the GNGB. Clearly, should this panel note any recommendations in that regard, that will also be related back to the Greater Norwich Growth Board itself. Okay,
Dave, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of silly ones, first of all, if I may, Paul.
Oh, silly ones. Do we do silly ones?
I'll give it a go. I'll see what you think. The Norwich Airport on page 23, mentioned in the scheme, is that purely just for the industrial estate and not for the actual passenger capacity of the airport we're talking about?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Nice short answer. The next question, if I may, Chair, on page 26 for GP 25, the monitoring of traffic on the NDR, who monitors that, and is there a way for us to see the results on a regular basis at all?
My understanding is that's a condition of the consent, and that of itself is, well, the monitoring itself is undertaken by Norfolk County Council, although I believe we have some responsibility for ensuring that conditions are complied with. I can certainly ask for any information that's available to be fed back. I would have to hold my hands up and say I'm not sure of the process at the moment where that gets fed back, but I can certainly take that away and come back to the council.
Presumably it's a highways matter, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything particular behind your question, Dave, that you were concerned about?
I just reading the notes about the feedback from residents about the use of it as well, and Horsford tends to bottleneck onto the NDR from time to time, and I don't get as many positive bits of feedback perhaps as the report suggests. So I was just wondering whether we get visibility of any kind of results of any monitoring that either Highways does or Broadden might have any responsibility for. That was all.
Okay, thank you. John, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. It's on the Carrow to Deal Ground Riverside Walk. I'm disappointed that's not going ahead. It says the rationale for delivery of this route no longer exists. Well, in the original Sustrans plan, there was plans for this Riverside Walk to come all the way to Thorpe St Andrew, and this would have been another step on that route. So to lose this means, you know, we don't seem to be making any further progress on this walk to Thorpe St Andrew.
Paul, do you want to comment?
Bear with me a second, Chairman. I would have to say it's not a project I have a great deal of familiarity with. I'm certainly prepared to take the question away and provide some feedback to this panel on the rationale behind that scheme and the position it's at.
Helen, would you like to add anything to that?
Unfortunately, I don't have any background on that particular site in front of me. So as Paul says, we're more than happy to look into that further and come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
So we could park that and come back to you.
Okay.
Could you provide John with a written response, Helen, do you think?
Yeah, in that particular project, if Councillor Ward is happy with that, then we can actually just email him with the rationale behind that. And then if he wants to raise it at any other meeting, then he can.
And it's not just this particular bit of the route, it's the overall original plan. And this was another step along the way, really. And it looks like the whole idea of a walk from Norwich to Thorpe St Andrew is being shelved now.
Okay, Helen, if you could provide a written response to John covering those points, please. Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, of course, we can speak to the infrastructure colleagues at the county who will have more background on this and why it hasn't come forward and some of that evidence. So we can certainly contact them to then give you a written update, John.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, you had a further question.
Thank you, Chairman. It relates to page 31, the Northwest Woodlands Country Park. My question just related to one of access, where we mention, it mentions in the last sentence in the first paragraph regarding habitat restoration enhancement schemes, car parking and visitor facilities. I didn't know whether there's any chance of mentioning looking at alternative access to it at later dates from the NDR, because at the moment the car parking will be going through Horsford Village. And I have mentioned more than once about whether we could explore the option of getting access via the NDR and whether that's something we could perhaps note on there at all.
Paul.
If this is the place to do so.
Oh, you can certainly consider it. Paul.
I mean, I can certainly raise that question. There's a specific project manager covering the Northwest Woodlands
I'm guessing it would be quite expensive, am I correct?
I would anticipate so. As I said, I'm happy to raise it to the project manager. The feasibility, I would have to say, to finish it out, of an alternative access from the NDR, which doesn't run through Horsford. No options immediately jump out to me, but I can certainly raise it as a point with the project manager, and again, happy to feed back on whether any exploration has been done and facilitate a direct conversation with the councillor about that.
If I just add a little bit of meat to that, if I may, Paul, you can already park just off the NDR on the roundabout there near the Reefham Road, and then you can walk through from that car park to Horsford's Woods. So it's got kind of access already indirectly on foot. So I suppose it's a case of encouraging people to park there and walk through as opposed to going through the village. That's the logic behind it, in case you think I'm coming at you with a blank check.
It did sound rather like it, but
it wasn't my intention.
I'm pleased to see you've got
apologies.
a suggestion.
Not at all, councillor. It's simply it's not something I've specifically explored myself or seen raised in previous papers with the Northwest Woodlands Country Park, but the project manager will have a full understanding. I can certainly again relate to your point.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul.
Okay. Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question about this this item about which I have an interest, and that is the Brundle Sports Hub. There's an amount of £100,000 that, according to the on page 21, it says that the applicant is Broadland. How was that? I mean, 100,000 out of a total of 1.3 million. That's not a small sum, but my understanding is that the entire project of 1.3 million is going to, a large proportion of that is going to be funded already out of the SIL funds that go to the parish council. So is this a contribution from the SIL to the SIL, or my question really is, how was that amount of £100,000 decided? Who decided 100,000 and not 125 or 600,000 or whatever? Just as a matter of interest. Thank you.
Paul, over to you.
Thank you. My understanding is that was the identified funding gap. So as you identified, there's £100,000 from the pooled SIL fund out of a total project budget of just shy of 1.35 million. The other funding is coming from Section 106 contributions from developments within the area, two developments, the Mallards and the Pastures, further investment from Brundle Investment Limited, part of the Norfolk Homes development, yeah, that's a majority of the funding. So my understanding that the rationale behind it was no more complicated than that was the identified funding gap and the additional funding required to get the scheme delivered.
So it's a shortfall, basically, with a rounded figure, I'm guessing. Well, probably wasn't exactly 100,000, I'm guessing, give or take.
The amount of SIL sought was 100,000. That's expected to cover the cost of the project. Necessarily, I suspect, before the actual contract for building is let, there is a degree of projection within that.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that question, just to follow up on that, I'm very aware of, like what happened with the Broadland Northway. They had a budget that they worked on, and it was costed. Now, this project of 1.3 million, I'm not saying that there is, but if in the circumstances that there was an overspend, would that be realistic for them to come to Broadland and say, well, actually, we would like a greater contribution from the growth board? Is that a possibility?
Paul?
I mean, I wouldn't want to rule that out at this stage. If there were cost increases across any project. Indeed, we've seen within this 5-year infrastructure investment plan itself that projects have been re-evaluated at higher sums. So it's certainly a possibility. What I would say is, I mean, I wouldn't draw similarities necessarily to the Broadland Northway if that was the example in this project. There being very different scales in terms of their civil engineering requirements, and therefore the risk around them is quite different as a profile. My understanding from the details around the construction costs is that essentially the way the contract will be let is that it will be on a fixed price basis with tenderers then bearing the issues with any increased costs. At least that's the information I have in front of me. Clearly there will be a proper procurement process undertaken, and should there be funding issues at that stage, no doubt they will become apparent.
Hopefully, Grant, you won't need to get your checkbook out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't see any further questions. Can you, Jessica?
Councillor Clancy.
Councillor Stuart Clancy, sorry. Go ahead, Stuart. Stuart, you're muted. Stuart, you're muted.
Sorry, okay, apologies. Just to follow up on Councillor Dave Thomas's point, re the wooded area and the access to the NDR, access by the NDR. I would agree with that, Dave, totally, that there is an access through the woods there with a inverted commas unofficial car park there, which is regularly used by a lot of people from Horsford, Thorpe Marett, Belthorpe, the whole area. I think it would make a great deal of sense to explore that further, and it could be done, I would suggest, and I agree again with Councillor Thomas, it isn't an open checkbook situation, it's a comparatively easy win. We're on a very low budget, and I would have thought it could be achieved constructively and quickly, and hopefully that can be noted, that we look into that, because it's a very easy win. And again, Dave is right, it benefits Horsford, it benefits Belthorpe, and it's a direct access of the NDR. To me, it's an absolute no-brainer, and I think we should investigate that. The other thing is East Norwich, page 22. I see that the deal yard is being put in together with Cara Works on this proposal, and also taking up Councillor John Ward's point in relation to the walkway there. I don't know if Paul can give us any more information on this, because I was aware of that there was a major application coming forward for the two sites, but I also am aware that the deal yard has been in local plans for 3, possibly 4 iterations of the local plan, and it never comes to fruition. I don't know if Paul could give us an update on that, because there won't be any merit in continually pitching for infrastructure funding for that area unless there is a positive planning application come forward. I was aware that it looked as if there could be one. I don't know if Paul can give us an update on that, because then it's totally relevant what Councillor Ward said in relation to continuing the footpath. So again, this is either one which is going to happen in this iteration of the process, or one which isn't going to happen. And I think, again, it's absolutely relevant to the GNDP, because the housing numbers are relevant as well. So this is a really important area which it's important to keep updates and information on, because it just sits there and basically little or nothing has happened for 15 years in the case of the deal yard. And we've had significant developers and investors look at it and walk away. So I would welcome a quick update from Paul on that as to whether this application is coming forward. Because frankly, it'd be brilliant news if it is. But if it isn't, it's absolutely stupid. It keeps appearing in there. Thank you, Jim.
Paul, update, please.
Thank you. Yes, well, to the extent that I'm aware of the scheme, I am aware that there are ongoing discussions between the various investors, landowners, the City Council, and indeed Homes England with regards to this site. In the first instance, preparing an overarching master plan for the area and looking at specifics of how that might be delivered. I'm not aware that there is an immediate application, but certainly that process is ongoing, and the partners within that are engaging constructively with those discussions. I guess ultimately the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. That said, I mean, when you look at Norwich and its growth, this is clear. This is a major strategic opportunity. It is without doubt a site that has significant challenges to overcome. I guess as a more general observation, it would not be unusual to find that there needs to be a great deal of work over a number of years and quite a lot of perhaps dogged tenacity around these types of sites to get them away. And I think that's the right thing to continue with at a Greater Norwich level. But I suppose to go back to my first point, yes, there are pragmatic ongoing discussions between the relevant parties with Homes England involved, and I am optimistic they will have a positive resolution in due course.
But at this moment, there is no application, so really the considerations are all theoretical at this stage.
My understanding is that the whole of the East Norwich site, I think there are some permissions in place over certain elements of it, but not in the context of a comprehensive application for the whole area.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Can you see any, James? Was that a no? You're muted. Right.
No, we can't see anyone else with hands raised, Chair.
So with those comments, is there any change that you want to make to these two recommendations? That's a no, Jessica?
No one's got their hands raised and no
Right,
comments
okay.
in the chat.
Then I put it to the panel. Can we endorse these two recommendations that go to Cabinet for consideration? Could you indicate by raising your hand, please?
That's been unanimous, Chair.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. I think, if I'm correct, am I, Jessica, that concludes the business of the meeting?
That's correct.
And I thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your attention. Wish you a good evening. And hopefully there's still some time left to enjoy that gin and tonic. I wish
Thank you,
good
Chair.
night.
Have a good evening all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.